I trust you've reconsidered.
No. He was taken, and someone has spent the last 5 years making sure I never found him. A tear formed in Clara's eyes. If Daniel is alive, why hasn't he come home? Adrian's expression hardened. Because whoever took him never intended to let him. Before Clara could respond, every light in Blackwoodq Manor suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. A second later, the mansion's emergency alarm began to scream. Ashcroft's voice echoed from somewhere down the hallway. "Mr. Blackwood, they're inside the house." Then, a gunshot shattered the silence. Clara instinctively ducked. Adrian grabbed her hand. His grip was firm. "Stay close to me." For the first time since they met, it wasn't the contract binding them together. It was survival. And somewhere in the darkness of Blackwoodq Manor, someone had come to finish what they had started 5 years ago. The gunshot echoed through Blackwoodq Manor like thunder. Then, silence. A suffocating, terrifying silence. Clara instinctively clutched Adrian's arm. The mansion was completely dark, except for faint moonlight filtering through the windows. The emergency alarm continued to blare. Somewhere downstairs, people were shouting. Doors slammed. Glass shattered. Adrian's voice remained steady. "Stay behind me." Clara couldn't help noticing the irony. Only hours ago, the world believed she was being protected by a blind man. Now, she realized the man leading her confidently through the darkness had been seeing everything all along. Another gunshot. Closer this time. Ashcroft's voice rang through the hallway. "Security, East Corridor. Don't let them reach the study." Adrian's expression hardened. "They're after the files." "What files?" "The evidence. The proof of who murdered my parents." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "So they know you've been investigating. They've finally realized how close I am." Adrian pulled open the hidden compartment once more. He removed the leather folder and handed it to Clara. "No matter what happens, don't let anyone take this." She looked down at the folder. "What if they catch us?" "They won't. And if they do," he paused. "Burn it." She stared at him. "It took 5 years to collect. I'd rather lose the evidence than let the wrong people destroy it." A loud crash came from downstairs. Heavy footsteps raced toward the second floor. Adrian looked toward the door. "They're coming." Without hesitation, he pulled Clara into a narrow passage concealed behind the bookshelf. The wall slid shut just as the bedroom door burst open. From inside the secret passage, they could hear voices. "Search everywhere." "He has to be here. Check the walls." Clara held her breath. The hidden corridor was barely wide enough for 2 people. She could feel Adrian's heartbeat. Strong, steady. He gently placed a finger over his lips. Not a sound. The intruders searched the room for several minutes. Drawers were ripped open. Furniture crashed to the floor. Someone cursed. Then, "They're not here. Move!" The footsteps faded. Only then did Adrian exhale. The secret passage led downward through the walls of the mansion. Old lanterns lined the narrow corridor. "Who built this?" Clara whispered. "My grandfather." "Why?" The Blackwoods lived through dangerous times. He believed every great house needed a way out. They continued walking. The passage twisted beneath the mansion before ending behind an old wine cellar. Adrian carefully opened a hidden door. The cellar was empty. For now. Ashcroft appeared moments later, breathing heavily. "Sir, are you hurt?" "No." "The intruders?" "They escaped." "How?" "The power outage disabled half the security system." Ashcroft looked ashamed. They knew exactly where to strike. Adrian clenched his jaw. "An insider." Ashcroft nodded. "I'm afraid so. There is something else." "What?" Ashcroft handed Adrian a small envelope he had found in the study. Inside was a single photograph. Adrian's face turned pale. Clara stepped closer. The picture showed a young boy sitting in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. He appeared to be around 15 years old. Thin, frightened, but unmistakable. Daniel. On the back of the photograph were 6 handwritten words. Stop looking, or he dies. Clara gasped. They're using him. Adrian's hands trembled. For the first time in years, hope and fear collided. Daniel was alive, but someone still controlled him. Before anyone could speak, Sophie's frightened voice echoed from the cellar entrance. Mr. Blackwood. She hurried down the stairs. They found one of the guards. Ashcroft frowned. Is he alive? Barely. He keeps repeating the same sentence. What sentence? Sophie swallowed hard. He says, don't trust the woman in black. Everyone fell silent. The woman in black. Victoria had been wearing a black dress earlier that day, but something about the warning felt too obvious. As if someone wanted them to suspect her. Adrian looked thoughtful. No, it's a trap. What do you mean? Clara asked. If someone wanted to frame Victoria, they'd leave exactly that message. So you don't think she did this? I think... He paused. Someone wants us looking in the wrong direction. An hour later, the police arrived. They searched the estate, collected evidence, questioned every employee, but the intruders had left almost nothing behind. Except one small object. Detective Marcus Hale, the lead investigator, approached Adrian. We found this near the study window. He held up a silver cufflink. It was engraved with a single letter. B? Does it belong to anyone here? The detective asked. Adrian studied it carefully. Then his expression changed. I've seen this before. Where? It belongs to someone on my company's board. The vice chairman, Benedict Rowe. Clara noticed something strange. The detective's eyes flickered for the briefest moment, almost as if he recognized the name. And wasn't surprised. It lasted less than a second, but Adrian saw it too. When the detective turned away, Adrian leaned toward Clara and whispered, He already knew. Did you notice that? Adrian's face grew grim. If the police know more than they're admitting, then we can't trust everyone wearing a badge. As dawn broke over Blackwoodq Manor, the mansion looked peaceful once again. But appearances could be deceiving. Someone had broken into one of the most secure homes in the country. Someone knew Adrian had regained his sight. Someone was holding Daniel captive. And now, someone inside the investigation itself might be lying. Clara stepped onto the balcony, exhausted. She needed fresh air. As she looked toward the estate gates, she noticed a figure standing outside the fence. A little boy, no older than 10. He was staring directly at the mansion. When Clara waved, he didn't move. Instead, he slowly raised his hand, holding a folded piece of paper. Then he turned and ran into the woods. Without thinking, Clara hurried downstairs and raced after him. She had no idea that the message in the little boy's hand was about to reveal the first shocking truth behind the Blackwood family's tragedy. Wait! Clara's voice echoed across the estate as she hurried after the little boy. The morning air was crisp, and dew covered the grass beneath her shoes. Behind her, Blackwoodq Manor grew smaller with every step. The boy darted through the trees with surprising speed. Please, Clara called. I'm not going to hurt you. For a brief moment, he slowed. Then he disappeared behind a cluster of tall pine trees. By the time Clara reached the spot, he was gone. Only a folded piece of paper lay on the ground. She picked it up with trembling fingers. Across the front, in uneven handwriting, were 3 words. For Adrian only. Clara hesitated. Every instinct told her to return it unopened. But another voice inside her whispered that every secret in this family had nearly destroyed them already. Slowly, she unfolded the note. Inside was a single sentence. He remembers the music box. Below it was a rough sketch of an old lighthouse overlooking the sea. No name, no signature, no explanation. Clara frowned. A music box? She folded the note and hurried back toward the manor. Adrian was waiting in the entrance hall. His face was tense. "Where were you?" "I saw a little boy outside the gates. I followed him." Ashcroft looked alarmed. "You left the grounds alone?" Clara held out the note. "He dropped this." Adrian took it. The moment he read the words, the color drained from his face. "He remembers." He whispered the sentence as if it belonged to another lifetime. Ashcroft stepped closer. "Sir?" Adrian looked up. "The lighthouse. It still exists." Ashcroft nodded slowly. "I thought it had been abandoned years ago." "It has." Adrian folded the note carefully. "No." He corrected himself. "That's what someone wanted us to believe." Clara watched him carefully. "What does the music box mean?" For a long moment, Adrian didn't answer. Then he walked to the fireplace. "When Daniel was 5, he was terrified of thunderstorms. So our mother gave him a small wooden music box. It played the same lullaby every night. He refused to sleep without it." Clara smiled sadly. "That's sweet." It was. Adrian's smile faded. When the accident happened, the music box disappeared with him. Clara's eyes widened. "So if someone mentioned it, they've seen Daniel." "Or," Adrian said quietly, "Daniel sent the message himself." Within an hour, Adrian, Clara, Ashcroft, and 2 trusted security officers were driving toward the coast. The old lighthouse stood nearly 50 miles from Blackwoodq Manor. Abandoned, forgotten, or so everyone believed. Rain clouds gathered overhead as the SUV climbed a narrow cliffside road. Finally, the lighthouse appeared. Its white paint had faded. Several windows were broken. Weeds covered the entrance. It looked deserted. Ashcroft frowned. "I don't like this." Adrian nodded. "Neither do I." The group entered cautiously. Dust coated the stone floor. Broken furniture lay scattered everywhere. No voices, no movement. Nothing. Then, Clara heard it. A faint melody. Soft, gentle, almost impossible to hear. She froze. "Do you hear that?" Everyone fell silent. The melody continued. It was coming from upstairs. Adrian's breathing quickened. "The music box!" He raced toward the spiral staircase. Clara followed close behind. The melody grew louder with every step. 2nd floor. 3rd floor. Finally, they reached the lantern room at the top. It was empty, except for an old wooden table. Resting on it was a tiny blue music box. The melody stopped. Adrian picked it up with shaking hands. He slowly opened the lid. Inside was a faded family photograph. His parents, himself, Daniel, and someone else. A woman whose face had been carefully scratched away. Clara leaned closer. "Who is she?" Adrian stared at the damaged picture. Before he could finish, a loud click echoed behind them. Everyone turned. The heavy metal door to the lantern room slammed shut, locked. Ashcroft rushed toward it. "It's sealed!" A familiar voice crackled through an old speaker hidden in the ceiling. "Good morning, Adrian." The voice was distorted, mechanical, impossible to identify. "I knew you'd come." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" A laugh filled the room. "You've been asking the wrong questions for 5 years. What do you want?" "I want you to stop looking. And if I don't?" Then the voice replied, "Then the next photograph you receive won't be of your brother. It will be of his grave." Clara felt her blood run cold. "Leave Daniel out of this," Adrian shouted. The speaker crackled again. "Oh, we never left him out. Oh." The line went silent. At that exact moment, the room began to shake. Ashcroft looked around in horror. "Sir, I think they've rigged the lighthouse." A deep rumble echoed beneath the floor. Pieces of stone began falling from the ceiling. "The staircase!" Clara shouted. They rushed to the door. It wouldn't budge. Another violent tremor. The old lighthouse groaned. Adrian grabbed a rusted iron bar lying against the wall. "Stand back!" He slammed it against the door. Once, twice, 3 times. The hinges began to crack. Dust filled the room. The floor tilted beneath their feet. "Again!" Ashcroft yelled. With one final strike, the door burst open. The group raced down the spiral staircase as chunks of stone crashed behind them. They reached the entrance just as the upper section of the lighthouse collapsed in a deafening roar. Everyone stumbled onto the wet grass, coughing through the dust. Clara looked back. The lantern room was gone, buried beneath tons of stone. If they had been 30 seconds later, none of them would have survived. As the dust settled, Adrian looked down at the blue music box still clutched in his hands. Something rattled inside. He frowned. This wasn't here before. Carefully, he opened the hidden compartment beneath the mechanism. Inside was a tiny brass key and a folded strip of paper. He unfolded it. His expression froze. Clara stepped beside him. "What is it?" Without a word, Adrian handed her the note. Written in neat black ink were 5 chilling words. "Don't trust Ashcroft, ever." Clara slowly lifted her eyes toward the elderly butler. Ashcroft stood only a few feet away, watching them. And for the first time since she had met him, Clara wasn't sure whether the man who had welcomed her into Blackwood Manor was their greatest ally, or the most dangerous liar of them all. The drive back to Blackwood Manor was painfully quiet. Rain beat steadily against the windows of the SUV. No one spoke. No one dared. Clara sat beside Adrian, but her eyes kept drifting toward Ashcroft in the front passenger seat. The note replayed in her mind. "Don't trust Ashcroft, ever." She wanted to believe it was another trick. After all, whoever had orchestrated the attack at the lighthouse had every reason to divide them. But what if it wasn't? What if the note was the first honest thing their enemy had ever sent? Ashcroft finally broke the silence. "Mr. Blackwood?" Adrian looked up. "Yes? I believe we should inform the police about the lighthouse." Adrian studied him for a long moment. "No." Ashcroft seemed surprised. "Sir, if the people behind this have connections inside law enforcement, we'll only warn them that we're getting closer." Ashcroft nodded slowly. "As you wish." His voice sounded calm, too calm. Clara couldn't tell whether it was loyalty or experience. That evening, Adrian invited Clara into his private study. He locked the door behind them. Then he placed the anonymous note on his desk. "What do you think?" Clara took a deep breath. "I think someone wants us to doubt Ashcroft." "You don't believe it?" "I don't know." She looked into Adrian's eyes. "But I do know this. If I wanted to destroy you, the first thing I'd do is make you suspicious of the people who love you." A faint smile touched Adrian's face. "You always see the human side first. And you? I've spent 5 years expecting betrayal." He leaned against the desk. "So perhaps between us, we'll finally find the truth." For the first time since they met, they shared a quiet laugh. The tension between them softened, not because the danger had passed, but because they were finally standing on the same side. A soft knock interrupted them. "Come in," Adrian called. Sophie entered, looking uneasy. "Sir, there's someone at the gate, asking to see Mrs. Blackwood." Clara frowned. "Me?" "He refuses to give his name. He says you'll recognize him." Minutes later, Clara stepped outside with Adrian close behind. Waiting at the estate gates was an elderly street musician holding a worn violin case. His clothes were patched. His gray beard reached his chest. He smiled when he saw Clara. "You probably don't remember me." "I'm afraid I don't. You bought me dinner once." Slowly, Clara remembered. Months earlier, she had shared her lunch with an old violinist outside the diner where she worked. He had thanked her and disappeared into the crowd. "You?" The old man nodded. "I've been looking for you." Adrian stepped forward. "What do you want?" The violinist looked around carefully to make sure they were alone. Then he lowered his voice. "I was there." Adrian frowned. "There? Where?" "The night of the accident." Every muscle in Adrian's body tensed. "What did you say?" "I saw your car go over the bridge. I saw another vehicle following you. And He hesitated. I saw a little boy climb out before the fire started. Adrian's breathing stopped. Daniel? The old man nodded. He wasn't alone. Clara's heart raced. Who was with him? Before the violinist could answer, a loud crack echoed through the air. The old man's eyes widened. A dark stain spread across his shirt. He looked down in confusion, then collapsed. No, Clara screamed. Adrian rushed forward and caught him before he hit the ground. The old man's breathing became shallow. Blood soaked Adrian's hands. Ashcroft, Adrian shouted. Call an ambulance. The violinist grabbed Adrian's sleeve with surprising strength. He coughed violently. They're watching. Who? Adrian pleaded. Who took Daniel? The old man struggled to speak. With the last of his strength, he whispered a single name. Beatrice. Then his hand fell limp. His eyes closed. He was gone. The ambulance arrived too late. The police declared the shooting the work of an unknown sniper. No weapon was found. No fingerprints. No witnesses. Only a single shell casing nearly 500 yards away. The killer had vanished. Late that night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stepped onto the balcony outside her room. The estate was quiet, almost peaceful, but her mind kept returning to the violinist's final word. Beatrice. Who was Beatrice? A person? A code name? A place? As she stood there, she noticed a light glowing in a window on the far side of the manor. The west wing. She frowned. No one was supposed to be there. Yet someone was carrying a lantern through room 17. She watched as the figure disappeared behind a curtain. Without thinking, Clara hurried downstairs. She reached the iron doors. This time, they weren't locked. She slipped inside and quietly made her way to room 17. The door stood slightly open. Inside, someone was searching through Daniel's belongings. Drawers had been pulled out. Books lay scattered across the floor. The figure wore a dark hood. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. "Who are you?" she demanded. The stranger froze, then slowly turned. The hood slipped back. Clara gasped. It wasn't Victoria. It wasn't Ashcroft. It wasn't anyone she recognized. It was an elderly woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. She looked at Clara with a mixture of surprise and relief. Tears welled in the woman's eyes as she whispered, "So, you're the girl Adrian finally chose." Clara took a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" The woman smiled sadly. "My name is Beatrice." The name hit Clara like lightning. The dying violinist hadn't been warning them about Beatrice. He had been trying to lead them to her. Before Clara could ask another question, Beatrice reached into her coat and pulled out an old leather journal. She held it out with trembling hands. If Adrian ever wants to know who murdered his parents, this diary contains every answer. Just then, a gunshot shattered the window behind them. Glass exploded across the room. Beatrice's eyes widened. She shoved the journal into Clara's hands and cried, "Run!" A second shot rang out. This one found its target. Beatrice collapsed to the floor, and from somewhere in the darkness outside the window, a familiar female voice whispered, "You're always one step too late, Adrian." Clara recognized the voice instantly. Victoria. The journal nearly slipped from Clara's trembling hands. Beatrice lay motionless on the wooden floor, a crimson stain spreading across her blouse. "Beatrice!" Clara dropped to her knees. The elderly woman coughed weakly. Her eyes fluttered open. "Listen." Her voice was barely audible. "You don't have much time." Clara gently held her hand. "Please don't try to talk. Help is coming." Beatrice managed a faint smile. "No, they'll never let me leave this house alive." Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Adrian burst into the room with Ashcroft and 2 security guards close behind. The moment Adrian saw Beatrice, he froze. "You." His voice cracked. "I thought you were dead." Beatrice looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Adrian. I couldn't come back." Adrian knelt beside her. What happened? For 20 years. I wanted to tell you, but they always found me. She turned toward Clara, the diary. Don't let anyone else read it first. Then she looked back at Adrian. I made a promise to your mother. I failed her. Adrian shook his head. No, you came back. Beatrice smiled one last time. Then her hand slipped from his. The room fell silent. Ashcroft quietly closed her eyes. She's gone. No one spoke for several minutes. The only sound was the rain tapping against the shattered window. Finally, Adrian stood. His face had changed. The grief was still there, but something else had replaced the uncertainty. Determination. He turned to Clara. The diary. She handed it to him. Its leather cover was cracked with age. Across the front, embossed in fading gold letters, were two initials. E.B. Who was she? Clara asked. Adrian stared at the cover. Elizabeth Blackwood. My mother. Clara blinked. This was your mother's diary? Adrian nodded slowly. Beatrice was her closest friend. She practically lived here. I haven't seen her since the accident. They moved to Adrian's private study and locked the door. Only Adrian, Clara, and Ashcroft remained. Adrian carefully opened the diary. Inside, hundreds of handwritten pages filled the book. Some entries described ordinary family life, birthday parties, summer vacations, Daniel learning to ride a bicycle. Clara smiled as she read. They seemed so happy. They were, Adrian whispered, until everything changed. Adrian turned to the final pages. The handwriting became hurried, uneven, almost frantic. He began reading aloud. June 12. Richard says someone inside the company is stealing millions. He refuses to tell me who until he has proof. I begged him to go to the police. He says the police cannot be trusted. Ashcroft exchanged a worried glance with Adrian. Adrian turned another page. June 18. Richard finally told me the name. I cannot believe it. If this is true, we have welcomed a monster into our home. The next page had been torn out. Adrian frowned. Someone removed it. Clara examined the binding. No, she pointed carefully. It wasn't removed recently. The page was torn out years ago. Someone had stolen the most important part of the diary. Adrian continued reading. June 22. If anything happens to us, Daniel must never be found. It is the only way to save him. Clara looked up in confusion. Your mother wanted Daniel to disappear? Adrian stared at the page. It doesn't make sense. Ashcroft suddenly spoke. Perhaps she wasn't hiding him from the police. She was hiding him from the killer. The room fell silent. It was the first explanation that fit. Just then, Clara noticed something unusual. The final page felt thicker than the others. She carefully ran her fingers across the paper. Adrian. I think there's something underneath. He looked closer. Hidden inside the back cover was a sealed envelope. Its wax seal was untouched. Across the front, Elizabeth Blackwood had written, "Only Adrian may read this." Adrian's hands trembled as he broke the seal. Inside was a single letter. He unfolded it slowly. His eyes scanned the first few lines. Then, he stopped breathing. Clara watched the color drain from his face. What is it? Adrian couldn't answer. Instead, he handed her the letter. She read the first sentence, and her own heart nearly stopped. Adrian, if you are reading this, then I am already dead. The person responsible for our family's destruction is not the one you suspect. The real mastermind has been sitting beside you for years, pretending to protect you. Clara's eyes slowly lifted from the page. She looked at Ashcroft. Ashcroft looked horrified. I swear to you, I've never seen that letter before. Before anyone could react, the study door slammed shut. Click. The lock turned from the outside. Then the lights went out. A familiar mechanical voice echoed through hidden speakers. Congratulations. You've finally reached the truth. But unfortunately, none of you are leaving that room alive. A faint hissing sound filled the air. Clara frowned. What is that? Ashcroft's eyes widened in horror. Gas. Poisonous gas began pouring through hidden vents in the walls. Adrian rushed to the windows. They wouldn't open. The door wouldn't budge. The room was sealed. As the gas thickened, Clara struggled to breathe. Her vision blurred. The last thing she saw before collapsing was Adrian wrapping one arm around her while desperately searching the room for another hidden exit. Then, everything went black. Darkness. Then, a faint voice. Clara. It sounded distant, as though someone were calling from the end of a long tunnel. Clara, wake up. She coughed violently. Fresh air rushed into her lungs. Her eyelids fluttered open. The first thing she saw was Adrian kneeling beside her, his face streaked with soot and sweat. You scared me, he whispered. She looked around. They were no longer inside the study. Instead, they were in an underground stone tunnel, lit by old emergency lanterns. Ashcroft was leaning against the wall, breathing heavily. What happened? Clara asked. Adrian helped her sit up. The gas wasn't meant to kill us instantly. It was meant to knock us unconscious. How did we get out? Ashcroft answered. There was another hidden passage behind the fireplace. I remembered it at the last second. Clara looked at him. You saved us. The old butler gave a tired smile. I've spent 28 years in this house. I know a few secrets. Adrian's expression remained serious. They wanted us alive. Why? Because if they wanted us dead, they could have filled the room with a lethal gas. Instead, someone had chosen to send a message. They were in control. They could reach Adrian anywhere, even inside his own home. As they walked through the tunnel, Clara noticed old portraits hanging on the damp stone walls. Why are there paintings down here? Ashcroft answered quietly. During the war, the family hid many of their valuables underground. They rounded a corner. The tunnel ended at a rusted iron door. Ashcroft pushed it open. Fresh morning light poured inside. They emerged inside an abandoned greenhouse hidden behind the western gardens. No one on the estate could have guessed a secret passage connected it to the mansion. Adrian looked back toward Blackwoodq Manor. They're always one step ahead. Clara gently touched his arm. Not anymore. He looked at her. For the first time, they've made mistakes. Back inside the manor, the police had already arrived. Detective Marcus Hale questioned every servant, every guard, every groundskeeper. When Adrian entered, Marcus approached immediately. Mr. Blackwood, you disappeared. I had my reasons. Marcus frowned. I'll need to search the study. You may. Adrian watched carefully as the detective entered the room. The study looked exactly as they had left it, except the diary was gone. Clara's heart dropped. No. She searched every inch of the desk. It was right here. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. What diary? Adrian studied the detective's face. If he was acting, he was very good. Ashcroft suddenly cleared his throat. Sir. Everyone turned. The elderly butler held up something small wrapped in cloth. I found this beneath the fireplace. He carefully unfolded the cloth. Inside lay a tiny silver pocket watch. Adrian's breath caught. It belonged to my father. The watch had stopped at exactly 8:17. Clara opened the cover. Inside was an engraving. The truth is always ahead of you. Below the engraving was a tiny switch. What happens if I press it? She asked. Adrian shrugged. Only one way to find out. She pressed it. Click. A hidden compartment sprang open. Inside was a rolled-up strip of film. Marcus stepped closer. What is that? Ashcroft answered before Adrian could. An old microfilm. Adrian's eyes widened. My father used these to store confidential company records. If this survived, it could contain everything. Within an hour, they drove to the only laboratory in the city capable of developing microfilm. An elderly technician named Mr. Collins welcomed them. This may take a few minutes. Everyone waited anxiously. Finally, the images appeared on the screen. Dozens of financial records, secret transfers, offshore accounts, company ownership documents. Then, one final image, a photograph. Clara frowned. That's impossible. The picture showed Richard Blackwood shaking hands with another man. The date printed in the corner read, 3 days before the accident. The other man's face was unmistakable. Benedict Rowe, the vice chairman, the same man whose engraved cufflink had been found after the break-in. Marcus looked stunned. So Richard knew him personally. Adrian shook his head. No, they were enemies. He zoomed in on the photograph. Richard wasn't smiling. He was handing Benedict a sealed envelope. Across the envelope, barely visible, were the words, evidence. Mr. Collins frowned. There's something else. He adjusted the machine. A final frame appeared. It wasn't a document. It was a handwritten note, photographed for safekeeping. Richard Blackwood's own handwriting. If anything happens to me, trust only the person who wears the silver compass. Everyone looked at one another. The silver compass? Clara asked. What does that mean? Ashcroft slowly reached into his vest pocket. Without a word, he removed a small silver compass attached to an old chain. Adrian stared at it in disbelief. You've had that all these years. Ashcroft nodded. Your father gave it to me the day before he died. Why didn't you tell me? Because he made me promise. Marcus crossed his arms. Convenient. Ashcroft's eyes flashed with anger. I've buried my own son. I've devoted my life to protecting Adrian. I don't need to defend my loyalty. For the first time, Clara believed every word he said. The anonymous note from the lighthouse had been a lie. Someone had wanted Adrian to lose the one person his father truly trusted. As they left the laboratory, Clara noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Its engine was running. Its windows were tinted. The moment Adrian looked toward it, the car sped away. Marcus immediately reached for his radio. Follow that vehicle. Police cruisers accelerated after it. The chase disappeared around the corner. A minute later, a deafening explosion shook the street. Smoke billowed into the sky. People screamed. Marcus froze. Oh no! The black sedan hadn't been escaping. It had been a distraction. Clara's phone rang. Unknown number. Her hands trembled as she answered. A calm female voice spoke. Mrs. Blackwood, if you want to see your brother Ethan alive, come alone. The call ended. Clara's blood turned to ice. She looked at Adrian, unable to speak. The enemy had changed tactics. They were no longer hunting Adrian. They were hunting the people he loved. Darkness. Then, a faint voice. Clara. It sounded distant, as though someone were calling from the end of a long tunnel. Clara, wake up. She coughed violently. Fresh air rushed into her lungs. Her eyelids fluttered open. The first thing she saw was Adrian kneeling beside her, his face streaked with soot and sweat. You scared me, he whispered. She looked around. They were no longer inside the study. Instead, they were in an underground stone tunnel lit by old emergency lanterns. Ashcroft was leaning against the wall, breathing heavily. What happened? Clara asked. Adrian helped her sit up. The gas wasn't meant to kill us instantly. It was meant to knock us unconscious. How did we get out? Ashcroft answered. There was another hidden passage behind the fireplace. I remembered it at the last second. Clara looked at him. You saved us. The old butler gave a tired smile. I've spent 28 years in this house. I know a few secrets. Adrian's expression remained serious. They wanted us alive. Why? Because if they wanted us dead, they could have filled the room with a lethal gas. Instead, Someone had chosen to send a message. They were in control. They could reach Adrian anywhere, even inside his own home. As they walked through the tunnel, Clara noticed old portraits hanging on the damp stone walls. "Why are there paintings down here?" Ashcroft answered quietly. During the war, the family hid many of their valuables underground. They rounded a corner. The tunnel ended at a rusted iron door. Ashcroft pushed it open. Fresh morning light poured inside. They emerged inside an abandoned greenhouse, hidden behind the western gardens. No one on the estate could have guessed a secret passage connected it to the mansion. Adrian looked back toward Blackwoodq Manor. They're always one step ahead. Clara gently touched his arm. "Not anymore." He looked at her. "For the first time, they've made mistakes." Back inside the manor, the police had already arrived. Detective Marcus Hale questioned every servant, every guard, every groundskeeper. When Adrian entered, Marcus approached immediately. "Mr. Blackwood, you disappeared. I had my reasons." Marcus frowned. "I'll need to search the study." "You may." Adrian watched carefully as the detective entered the room. The study looked exactly as they had left it, except the diary was gone. Clara's heart dropped. No. She searched every inch of the desk. It was right here. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. "What diary?" Adrian studied the detective's face. If he was acting, he was very good. Ashcroft suddenly cleared his throat. "Sir." Everyone turned. The elderly butler held up something small wrapped in cloth. "I found this beneath the fireplace." He carefully unfolded the cloth. Inside lay a tiny silver pocket watch. Adrian's breath caught. It belonged to my father. The watch had stopped at exactly 8:17. Clara opened the cover. Inside was an engraving. "The truth is always ahead of you." Below the engraving was a tiny switch. "What happens if I press it?" she asked. Adrian shrugged. "Only one way to find out." She pressed it. Click. A hidden compartment sprang open. Inside was a rolled-up strip of film. Marcus stepped closer. "What is that?" Ashcroft answered before Adrian could. "An old microfilm." Adrian's eyes widened. "My father used these to store confidential company records. If this survived, it could contain everything." Within an hour, they drove to the only laboratory in the city capable of developing microfilm. An elderly technician named Mr. Collins welcomed them. "This may take a few minutes." Everyone waited anxiously. Finally, the images appeared on the screen. Dozens of financial records, secret transfers, offshore accounts, company ownership documents. Then, one final image, a photograph. Clara frowned. "That's impossible." The picture showed Richard Blackwood shaking hands with another man. The date printed in the corner read, 3 days before the accident. The other man's face was unmistakable. Benedict Rowe, the vice chairman. The same man whose engraved cufflink had been found after the break-in. Marcus looked stunned. So Richard knew him personally. Adrian shook his head. No. They were enemies. He zoomed in on the photograph. Richard wasn't smiling. He was handing Benedict a sealed envelope. Across the envelope, barely visible, were the words, "Evidence." Mr. Collins frowned. "There's something else." He adjusted the machine. A final frame appeared. It wasn't a document. It was a handwritten note photographed for safekeeping. Richard Blackwood's own handwriting. "If anything happens to me, trust only the person who wears the silver compass." Everyone looked at one another. "The silver compass?" Clara asked.
"Will you marry me?"
"What does that mean?"
Yes, I will.
Ashcroft slowly
I love
reached
you.
into his vest
I love you
pocket.
too.
Without a word, he removed a small silver compass attached to an old chain. Adrian stared at it in disbelief. "You've had that all these years." Ashcroft nodded. "Your father gave it to me the day before he died. Why didn't you tell me?" Because he made me promise. Marcus crossed his arms. Convenient. Ashcroft's eyes flashed with anger. I've buried my own son. I've devoted my life to protecting Adrian. I don't need to defend my loyalty. For the first time, Clara believed every word he said. The anonymous note from the lighthouse had been a lie. Someone had wanted Adrian to lose the one person his father truly trusted. As they left the laboratory, Clara noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Its engine was running. Its windows were tinted. The moment Adrian looked toward it, the car sped away. Marcus immediately reached for his radio. Follow that vehicle. Police cruisers accelerated after it. The chase disappeared around the corner. A minute later, a deafening explosion shook the street. Smoke billowed into the sky. People screamed. Marcus froze. Oh no! The black sedan hadn't been escaping. It had been a distraction. Clara's phone rang. Unknown number. Her hands trembled as she answered. A calm female voice spoke. Mrs. Blackwood, if you want to see your brother Ethan alive, come alone. The call ended. Clara's blood turned to ice. She looked at Adrian, unable to speak. The enemy had changed tactics. They were no longer hunting Adrian. They were hunting the people he loved. Clara's hand shook so badly that the phone slipped from her fingers. It hit the pavement with a sharp crack. Adrian caught it before it slid into the street. What happened? She opened her mouth, but no words came. Ashcroft stepped closer. Miss Clara. Finally, she whispered. They have Ethan. Silence. Even the noise of passing traffic seemed to disappear. Adrian's face hardened. Tell me exactly what they said. They told me. She struggled to steady her breathing. If I want to see my brother alive, I have to go alone. Marcus Hale frowned. When? They didn't say. They just hung up. Marcus immediately signaled 2 officers. Trace that call. One officer shook his head after a few moments. Disposable phone. No location. No usable signal. Marcus cursed under his breath. They planned this. Back at Blackwoodq Manor, Clara paced the length of Adrian's study. She dialed Ethan's number over and over. Each call went straight to voicemail. She tried the hospital. No answer. She called Mrs. Alvarez. The elderly woman answered on the second ring, her voice trembling. Clara, what happened? Ethan isn't here. Clara's heart nearly stopped. What do you mean? 2 people came this morning. They wore hospital uniforms. They said Ethan needed emergency tests. They showed official-looking papers. Mrs. Alvarez began crying. I thought they were telling the truth. Clara closed her eyes. It wasn't your fault. But I let them take him. No, Clara whispered. They fooled all of us. Adrian stood silently by the fireplace. Every instinct told him this wasn't just about Ethan. It was about forcing Clara to make an impossible decision. He turned to Ashcroft. Increase security. No one enters or leaves this estate without my permission. Ashcroft nodded. It will be done. Marcus looked unconvinced. They don't want the manor. They want Clara. Adrian met his gaze. They'll have to come through me. That evening, another message arrived. Not by phone. Not by email. A small black envelope was delivered to the front gate by a teenage bicycle courier who had no idea who hired him. Inside was a photograph. Clara gasped the moment she saw it. Ethan was sitting in a chair. He looked frightened, but unharmed. Today's newspaper rested on his lap. Proof that the picture was recent. On the back of the photograph were handwritten instructions. Midnight. St. Agnes Orphanage. Come alone. Tell no one. Or, your brother dies. I can't ignore this, Clara said. They'll kill him. Marcus folded his arms. It's almost certainly a trap. I know. But he's my brother. Adrian stepped toward her. You are not going alone. They specifically said. I don't care what they said. If they wanted to kill Ethan, They already would have. They need something. What? Adrian looked at the diary-shaped empty space on his bookshelf. They think we still have my mother's diary. Clara stared at him. But it was stolen. They don't know that. Just before midnight, rain once again covered the city. The abandoned St. Agnes orphanage stood on the outskirts of town, its broken windows staring into the darkness like empty eyes. Clara walked toward the entrance, her hood pulled low. From a distance, it looked as though she had come alone. But hidden in the shadows were Adrian, Ashcroft, Marcus, and a team of trusted security officers. Each wore a small earpiece. Each waited for Adrian's signal. Inside the orphanage, Clara's footsteps echoed through the long hallway. Paint peeled from the walls. Old toys lay scattered across the floor. Somewhere upstairs, a child laughed. Clara froze. The laugh stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Then a woman's voice drifted through the darkness. "You actually came." Victoria stepped into the moonlight. She wore a long black coat. A pistol rested casually in her hand. Clara's pulse quickened. "Where's Ethan?" Victoria smiled. "Safe. For now. I want to see him." "You'll see him. When I have the diary." "I don't have it." Victoria tilted her head. "I was hoping you'd lie." She slowly raised the pistol. "Try again." Before Clara could answer, a slow clap echoed from the second floor. Everyone looked up. Another figure emerged from the shadows. An older man, elegant, perfectly dressed. His silver hair gleamed beneath the moonlight. Victoria immediately lowered her weapon. "You're early." The man smiled. "I dislike waiting." Clara had never seen him before, yet something about him felt strangely familiar. The man descended the staircase with effortless confidence. He stopped only a few feet away. Then he looked directly at Clara. "You must be Adrian's wife." His voice was calm, cultured, dangerously polite. "My name is—" He paused. "Benedict Rowe." Clara's heart pounded. The vice chairman. Richard Blackwood's enemy. The man from the microfilm. Benedict smiled warmly. "It has taken 5 years, but we're finally all in the same room." At that exact moment, Adrian stepped out of the shadows. "I've been waiting just as long." Victoria spun around in shock. "You brought him?" Clara hadn't. Adrian had ignored the kidnapper's demand. He stood in the doorway with Ashcroft beside him. Marcus and the security team quietly surrounded the building from outside. For a brief second, Benedict laughed, a deep, genuine laugh. Then he looked Adrian straight in the eyes and said, "I suppose it's time I told you the truth." He spread his arms. "I didn't kill your parents." The room fell silent. Adrian's jaw tightened. "You're lying." "No." Benedict's smile vanished. "The person who ordered their deaths is someone you loved." Then, from somewhere deep inside the orphanage, a frightened voice cried out, "Clara!" It was Ethan. He was alive. But before anyone could move toward him, the floor beneath Adrian gave way with a deafening crack. The rotten wood collapsed. Adrian plunged into the darkness below. "Adrian!" Clara screamed. The sound of his body hitting concrete echoed through the abandoned building. Then, silence. No movement, no reply. Only Benedict's cold voice broke the stillness. "The game," he said quietly, "has finally begun." "Adrian!" Clara's scream echoed through the abandoned orphanage. The rotten floorboards gave way completely, sending a cloud of dust into the air. For one terrifying moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, only darkness beneath the gaping hole. Victoria smiled. One problem solved. Clara spun toward her. "You monster." She lunged forward, but Benedict caught Victoria's arm before she could raise her pistol. "No!" Victoria looked confused. "But, I said no!" His voice was calm, yet commanding. "We still need Adrian alive." Clara noticed something strange. Victoria actually obeyed him, whoever Benedict was. He wasn't merely her partner. He was her superior. Outside, Marcus Hale heard the collapse. "Move in!" he shouted into his radio. Police officers and Blackwood security stormed the orphanage from every entrance. Chaos erupted. Gunfire echoed through the old building. Victoria fired twice before disappearing through a side hallway. Benedict remained perfectly calm. He slowly backed toward an old elevator shaft. "You'll find the truth soon enough," he said. "Whether you survive it is another matter." He stepped backward. The floor beneath him slid open. Before anyone could reach him, he vanished into the darkness below. The hidden platform closed again. It was gone, as though it had never existed. Clara rushed to the hole where Adrian had fallen. "Ashcroft! I can't see him!" Ashcroft grabbed a flashlight from one of the officers. Its beam cut through the darkness. Nearly 20 feet below, Adrian lay motionless on a pile of broken wooden beams. Clara's heart stopped. "No." Marcus looked over the edge. "He's breathing." Relief flooded through her. "Get a rope." Within minutes, the rescue team lowered themselves into the pit. As they reached Adrian, something caught Clara's attention. The floor below wasn't solid concrete. It was a steel door, hidden beneath decades of dust. One of the officers brushed it clean. Large black letters slowly appeared. Blackwood Foundation, archive level. Adrian's eyes fluttered open. He groaned in pain. Then looked directly at the words. "I've never seen this before." Ashcroft frowned. "Neither have I." Marcus looked around the underground chamber. "This wasn't part of the orphanage." "No," Adrian whispered. "It was built underneath it." Using a crowbar, the officers forced the steel door open. A blast of cold air rushed upward. A staircase descended into darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life one by one. The hidden facility had electricity. Someone had been using it. Recently. Clara looked at Adrian. "You shouldn't be walking." He winced as he stood. "I've waited 5 years. I'm not stopping now." The group slowly descended. The underground complex stretched farther than anyone imagined. Long hallways, locked offices, storage rooms, surveillance cameras, rows of dusty filing cabinets. It looked less like a bunker and more like a secret research center. "What is this place?" Clara whispered. Ashcroft stared in disbelief. "I worked for this family for nearly 3 decades. I never knew this existed." Marcus stopped suddenly. "Look." On the wall hung dozens of photographs. Children. Hundreds of them. Each photograph had a number. Some were crossed out with red ink. Others weren't. Clara's stomach tightened. "What does this mean?" No one answered. Then Adrian noticed one photograph near the center. His breathing caught. Number 17. A teenage boy. Dark hair. Gray eyes. The same smile Adrian remembered from childhood. Daniel. Older. Alive. Clara covered her mouth. It really is him. Beneath the photograph were 3 words. Transfer completed. Adrian reached out with trembling fingers. "I was right. He survived." But where did they take him? At the end of the hallway stood a reinforced metal door. Unlike the others, it was unlocked. Adrian pushed it open. Inside was a small office, a desk, a lamp, several filing cabinets, and one large wall map. The map was covered in colored pins connected by red string. Blackwood Manor, the lighthouse, the orphanage, the hospital where Ethan had been treated, even Clara's old apartment, every place they had visited, had been marked. Someone had been tracking their every move. For years. Clara shivered. "They always knew where we'd go." Ashcroft opened one of the filing cabinets. Inside were hundreds of personnel files. He pulled out the first folder, then froze. "Sir, what is it?" Ashcroft slowly turned the file around. Across the top was written, Project Phoenix. Below it, in bold letters, subject, Daniel Blackwood. Adrian's hands shook as he opened the file. The first page contained a recent medical report. Patient name, Daniel Blackwood. Status, alive location. Classified. Clara smiled through tears. "He's alive." Adrian couldn't speak. For the first time in 5 years, he had proof. Not hope, not rumors, proof. But as Adrian turned the next page, his expression changed. His smile disappeared. His face turned pale. "No." Clara looked over his shoulder. The report included a photograph of Daniel, not as a prisoner, not restrained, not frightened. He was standing beside Benedict Rowe, wearing an expensive suit, smiling confidently. His employee identification badge read, Daniel Blackwood, Director of Operations. Clara stared in disbelief. "This can't be right," Adrian whispered. "It means he isn't being held captive." Before anyone could process the revelation, a slow clap echoed through the underground office. They turned. Standing in the doorway, perfectly dressed, calm as ever, was Benedict Rowe. He smiled at Adrian. "You've finally found your brother." He stepped aside. Another man walked into the room, tall, confident, dark-haired, gray-eyed, no longer the frightened little boy from the photographs. He looked directly at Adrian. A faint smile crossed his face. Then he spoke. "Hello, Adrian. It's been—" He paused. "A very long time." The room fell deathly silent. Adrian's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Daniel?" The young man smiled. "That's right. But I'm afraid I'm not the little brother you remember." For a long moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Adrian stared at the man standing in the doorway, searching his face for the little boy he had carried on his shoulders, the little brother who used to laugh every time the old blue music box played. He found traces of him. The same gray eyes, the same crooked smile. But something was different. The warmth was gone. "Daniel," Adrian whispered again. The young man smiled politely. "You've changed." Adrian let out a shaky laugh. "So have you. 5 years of unanswered prayers. 5 years of guilt. 5 years of believing his little brother had been kidnapped. And now?" Daniel stood only a few feet away. Alive, healthy, well-dressed. Clara expected the brothers to embrace. Instead, Daniel slipped both hands into his pockets. "You shouldn't have come here." Adrian frowned. "I've spent 5 years looking for you." "I know." "You knew." Daniel nodded. "I've known exactly where you've been." The words hit Adrian like a punch to the chest. "You knew I was searching for you. And you never came home?" "No." "Why?" Daniel looked away. "Because home stopped existing the night our parents died." Benedict folded his arms. "I believe it's time everyone stopped guessing." He walked to the center of the room and placed several old files on the desk. "You've blamed me for 5 years. You've called me a murderer, a kidnapper, a traitor. I've been called much worse." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Weren't you?" Benedict sighed. "I lied. I stole money. I manipulated board members. I even allowed you to hate me. But I did not kill your parents. And I never kidnapped Daniel." Marcus Hale stepped forward. "Then explain this." He held up the Project Phoenix file. Benedict nodded. "I will." He opened the folder to a page none of them had read. Across the top were the words, "Witness Protection Authorization." Clara frowned. "Witness protection?" Benedict looked at Adrian. "The night of the crash, Daniel saw the face of the person who cut your brakes." The room fell silent. He was only 10. But he remembered everything. The killer realized that. So someone hid him. Exactly. Adrian shook his head. "Who?" Benedict answered quietly. "Your mother." Clara's eyes widened. "Elizabeth?" Benedict nodded. "The diary was incomplete. Your mother discovered the conspiracy days before the crash. She knew someone close to your family planned to kill Richard. When the accident happened, she was dying. But before she died, she made one final decision. She begged me to protect Daniel." Adrian stared in disbelief. "You expect me to believe my father trusted you?" "No." Benedict replied. "Your mother did." Ashcroft slowly lowered his head. "It's true." Everyone turned toward him. Ashcroft's voice trembled. "I was there." Elizabeth asked Benedict to disappear with Daniel. She believed the killer would come back to finish what they started. "So we created the kidnapping story. So the killer would stop looking." Clara felt her heart pounding. "Then Daniel wasn't kidnapped at all." "No." Daniel finally spoke. "I was hidden. I lived under different names. In different countries. I wasn't allowed to contact Adrian. I hated it. But it kept me alive. Adrian's voice cracked. You let me believe you were dead. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to come home. So many times. I wrote letters. I begged. But every time, Benedict reminded me of Mom's last words. If I came back too early, we would both die. For the first time, Clara saw genuine pain in Daniel's face. This wasn't a young man who had abandoned his family. This was a little boy who had sacrificed his childhood. Before Adrian could respond, a slow clap echoed through the underground corridor. Everyone turned. Victoria emerged from the shadows. She wasn't smiling anymore. Instead, she looked furious. I warned you, Benedict. You talk too much. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood 6 armed men. Each carried a rifle. Marcus immediately drew his weapon. So, he said quietly, now we know whose side you're on. Victoria laughed. My side? You still don't understand. She slowly removed a silver pendant from around her neck. Inside it was an old family photograph. She held it up. Adrian's face turned pale. It showed his parents, himself, Daniel, and Victoria. As a child, Clara frowned. What is that? Victoria looked directly at Adrian. My mother worked for your family. When she discovered the truth, your father abandoned her. My mother died believing the Blackwoods destroyed our lives. She clenched the pendant tightly. I spent 20 years making sure your family suffered the same pain mine did. Adrian shook his head. That's impossible. My father would never. Wouldn't he? Victoria interrupted. You only know the version of Richard Blackwood that everyone admired. You never knew the man who made enemies. The room fell into stunned silence. Before another word could be spoken, a single gunshot rang out. Everyone ducked. One of Victoria's own men collapsed. A second shot echoed. Another gunman fell. Then a third. The armed men looked around in panic. Who's shooting? The answer came from the darkness behind them. A deep voice called out, drop your weapons. More armed officers flooded into the bunker. Not local police. Federal agents. Wearing tactical gear. Leading them was a woman in a Navy suit. She held up her badge. Federal Organized Crime Division. She looked straight at Benedict. Mr. Rowe, your message reached us. Clara blinked. You called them. Benedict nodded. 3 days ago. I knew today would force the real mastermind into the open. Victoria's confident smile disappeared for the first time. She slowly stepped backward. No, this wasn't supposed to happen. The federal agent raised her weapon. It's over, Victoria. But Victoria smiled again. Not with confidence. With certainty. You still don't understand. She looked at Adrian. Then at Daniel. Then at Clara. I was never the mastermind. Everyone froze. She slowly turned toward the federal agent and whispered, You've been standing beside her all along. The agent's expression changed. Confusion flashed across her face. Then, one of the federal officers quietly raised his rifle. Not toward Victoria, toward Adrian. The entire room fell silent. Before we find out who that officer is really working for, I want to ask you something. If you were Adrian, could you forgive a brother who disappeared for 5 years to protect you, or would the pain be too great to overcome? Let me know your answer in the comments. I read them all, and I'm curious to see what you think. And if this story has kept you guessing so far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. The final chapter is coming next, and trust me, everything is about to change. The officer tightened his grip on the rifle, then slowly removed his cap. Adrian's eyes widened. I know you, the man smiled coldly. Yes, you've known me, your entire life.